Hey guys, it's Katie and I'm here today with my next discussion video. Today's video is going to be difficult to talk about, I think, but it's been something that's been kind of on my mind for a long time. And that is, reader shaming and the education system and just society putting pressures on people and readers, kind of saying what you should and shouldn't read. I don't know if that's going to make sense. Hopefully it makes sense by the end of this video. But I was inspired to do this by actually quite a few people. I've seen a couple of people do videos along these lines over the last couple of months. But the one that really inspired me the most was Rocky from Blonde with a Book. And I'm going to post her original video down below. But it's called Why Am I Embarrassed to Read YA? And she goes through a whole wonderful, beautiful discussion. And I just really recommend going to watch her video before you potentially jump into mine, because I'm going to talk about some similar themes that she talked about in hers. Not so much as in a response kind of a way, but in just sharing my own experience, because I have a feeling that it'll be a little bit different than most people here on BookTube. So let's just see how this goes and jump right into my discussion / adventure. I'm going to start by talking about my experience in school and talking a little bit about some of the things Rocky brought up. First and foremost, I went to a non-traditional schooling system for a large chunk of my life. And so I didn't necessarily have a ton of the same experiences as a lot of you guys might have, going to either public institutions or even like traditional schooling in general. Because like I know in traditional schooling you have a set reading list to read, and you had to like take all of these different reading tests, and you got placed, and then you had to like take tests on them. And I did that at a certain point too, but I'll get there later in my journey. But first and foremost, as I said, I went to a non-traditional schooling system. If any of you on here are familiar with Montessori, that's where I went. And when I say non-traditional, I mean like we did not sit at desks and have lectures and learn that way. We learned through experience and through doing things ourselves by using materials. It was very interactive, very hands-on. We would have lessons, and it would be based on our personal growth rather than some set thing that we were supposed to reach. I mean, we had specific goals that we had to reach based on our age and our overall, placement in life, whatever. But we were not confined to living up to certain standards, if you will. It was more about personal growth and learning in a different way. We didn't have tests. We didn't have homework that we had to do. Everything that we did was in the classroom, and we were able to live our lives outside of the classroom. And honestly, I learned the best that way. Ever since I transferred over to traditional schooling system, I've just really seen a difference in how I learn and how I deal with things. And as I like to tell people very often, when I was at Montessori, I feel like the things that I learned there and the things that I did there, I retain maybe like 80 to 90% of the information and the things that I did there. Whereas in traditional schooling systems, I retain maybe 30 to 40% of what I learn because of the way it's taught and because of my specific learning style, and basically having to teach myself over again what I learned in class because I wasn't getting conveyed, things weren't getting conveyed properly. And add on top of that, I have multiple disabilities. I have physical disabilities, learning disabilities, just everything under the sun, and they impact my life daily. I have fine motor skill issues, so it made handwriting very difficult for me, and still does. I need extra time on exams because I can't, because of my processing disorder and because of my incredibly slow reading rate. And because of my migraines, I have a whole other issue with that, and that like if I have to miss class or take an exam, like that could severely hinder me because, I'll be dying and you're forcing me to do something else. Just I have, just as I said, a whole slew of stuff. I have extreme test anxiety, and I know some anxiety is good for tests because it's just, positive anxiety, if you know what I mean. But no, mine is to the point where it is so debilitating that I cannot basically function as a human. So I just have all of these extra things out there that are impacting my learning. And so just being in that non-traditional school setting was the best place for me, and it just really helped me learn and become the person that I am. Like, I'm forever grateful to one teacher in particular who I had there, because she specialized in people like me, and she was able to help me kind of break out of my shell, because who I was severely bullied, and I just had a whole mess of issues. And you might be like, how does that connect to this? Well, it connects to this discussion in a lot of different ways, because one of the things Rocky brought up was taking those reading comprehension tests. And once I transferred over to traditional schooling systems, I had to take those too. And I was always, always an avid reader. You would always see me with a book or a notebook or something. I was either writing a story or I was reading something. I would often want to shirk my other things that I had to learn, like math, math and handwriting, to read. And so, I mean, I never really had an issue for my age range. I was right where I needed to be for reading. But then when I got to the traditional education system and I had to take the reading comprehension tests or whatever, and we had to do this thing called accelerated reading. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically you take a test, and based on how well you score, it will place you in a range of where your reading abilities are. And you had to like read specific books within that age range, and only that age range, and then take these like online test things based on how well you understood or retained the things that you read. And it would ask you like minuscule details on like random stuff, and I would always do so poorly on them because I had issues with testing. And a lot of the books that I read also tended not to be in the system. So then the school would have to like figure out how to give me credit for the books that I was reading that were still within my range, but that weren't on the thing. Like I read the Animal Arc books like in 4th grade, and they were never in the AR system. So what they had me do is write book reports, and I'm like, cool, that's something I actually prefer, and I would usually do pretty well on those. But when I had to take those tests, the stupid standardized tests that aren't testing anything except for the little box that they're putting you in, and how well you conform to the thing that they want you to conform to, it was just so incredibly frustrating. And after a while, because I just wasn't liking having to take the tests, and because I just wasn't really into the books that I was reading at the time, I kind of stopped reading, or not necessarily stopped reading, but only reread the same kind of books over and over again and didn't pick up anything new. I just didn't want to do that. And I remember I had a teacher who was corresponding with my mom. She's like, Katie needs to read things. Like, what does she like to read? And my mom was like, well, she kind of likes fantasy. And it's like, okay, well, here's this fantasy like series for her to try. And I tried it and I didn't like it. I still have them somewhere in the basement. And I read the first book, and it took me months to get through it. And it's not a very long book. I was just bored. And I'm wondering that if I were to pick up that series again today, whether I'd actually enjoy it. I probably might, but I just was not in the right mindset to read something like that. And a lot of this kind of goes to, when I was in Montessori, I was able to read and do what I wanted. I mean, a lot of it goes to the fact that traditional schooling systems want to shove us into specific boxes. We have to fit certain requirements and fit this specific mold that society wants us to fit into. And I think that's wrong on so many levels because we are all different. We all have unique aspects to us, and the fact that you want us to fit these specific standards, like, I don't know, the national average is whatever, and GPA and all of this stuff, it's like, it's all objective. Like, you are not a number. We are not numbers. We are individuals with unique ways of thinking and going about things. And I feel like a lot of our creativity and a lot of the things that we're actually interested in and passionate about get shoved to the side for the sake of society and how it wants us to conform. And it just pisses me off to no end because I hate being compared to others because I am not like someone else. No matter how similar we are in a lot of ways, whether it's our age range or certain things that we like, things like that, we all have distinct differences. We all have new things to offer, and we shouldn't be forced to be put into these little boxes just to conform to society and be a certain way. It's just, if you can't tell, I have a lot of feelings about the education system and the fact that, like, what's the quote, the societal norms. Like, I could just rant about that for literally hours because it has impacted me in such a severe way. Basically, we shouldn't have to conform and we should just do what we want to do. Like, the non-traditional education system that I was part of, like, we were able to do things in such a unique way. Like, I learned math using bead chains and like these like square wooden chips. So, I mean, I hated math and I was terrible at math, but by using the materials and things, like, it made me enjoy it a little bit more. Like, as I said, bead bar layout. So it would be like a different color for a different number, and then you'd count, and then you'd learn math facts. So kind of using an abacus, but like not, we had one of those too, and we would, different colors, and we would just learn things visually and by doing it. And even reading, like, we were encouraged to pick up things that we were interested in. The classroom had such a vast library of books that we could just wander up and pick up whatever we want. And I remember when I was 6, one of the first books that I picked up was The Last of the Mohicans. And it was one of those, like, abridged, like the mini pocket edition classics. And it was pink. And I just, like, drawn to the color, and, like, I loved the size of it. I thought it was super cute. And so what I did was I just walked up to it and I was like, I'm gonna check this out. And I picked up this book and I read it. And I don't remember, like, every tiny little detail from it, but I remember being like, I am reading, I am enjoying this, even though now I know the story is, like, hella depressing. I just loved having that freedom to go and pick up something no matter what, whether it was, an adult book or something that, quote, my age range should have been reading. I just was always able to pick up and be interested in books that I was reading. And I never had to conform to something like that. I was just free. And that was the same thing in a lot of other aspects of my education in that non-traditional education system. So it was a really difficult transition period for me when I transferred over to traditional education system. And in some ways, I never fully managed to transition in a lot of ways. Like, getting homework was weird. Like, I remember being excited about it, but also being like, what? Why am I having to do this? Like, I no longer have time to do things that I actually enjoy after school and things that enrich me in other ways. And taking tests, like, I'll never forget going from Montessori to a traditional education system and taking my first vocabulary quiz. I had no idea what to expect. And, the teacher was incredibly rude about it because I didn't do well. And I'll never forget, he wrote "ugh" on the back because I did so poorly. And it got to the point where I was just like, I was upset about it, but, and just having a teacher say something so terrible, like, oh my God, this is like the worst thing ever. And I had to go up to him and basically tell him, I have never really experienced something like this before. I went to a non-traditional education system. This was kind of my first experience with a test and a quiz like this. So I was a little bit, I had to explain to him my situation. And after that, he was like, oh, like, he just never considered that to be a thing because I was new. Like, that was in 7th grade that happened to me. I'd gone back and forth. I had a period of time where I was in public school, fourth and part of 5th grade, but that was a mess for a lot of reasons too. Like, I just did not have what I needed in terms of academic support, and I was getting so severely bullied for everything under the sun that I just could not function. It was just a bad situation, and then I was just super sick and was missing a lot of school, and so I ended up going back to the non-traditional education system, and it was a little bit better. But long story short, I just hate that society has put all of these constraints on us. And this kind of is a nice segue into what Rocky was kind of talking about with the accelerated reading tests, or the reading comprehension tests that, she had to take. I mean, we all had to take them, I think, in some way, shape, or form. But being told what I could and could not read after after being so free and being able to read what I wanted to read in a school setting was just so awful. It felt like I was in chains in some ways. And maybe that's a bit dramatic, but it's a really good illustration, I think. Like, going from having wings so I can fly and do what I want, and then having my wings clipped and bound, it was just so jarring. And I was already going through a lot of other stuff in the process of transitioning to a new education system and dealing with some health issues and just trying to make new friends. Like, it was just very, very difficult all at once. And my reading was not where it needed to be because of my learning disability. Like, I was below average or something along those lines, but despite having read all of these books throughout my childhood and having a very vast vocabulary, because of this thing that is going on in my brain and just my whole overall system, I wasn't where I needed to be according to that box and according to that system. And that brings me to another point that Rocky brought up, and that is, the fact of all of these different classifications, like middle grade, YA, adult, classics, all of those things. Like, I was never really introduced to any of those classifications except for classics, arguably until I joined BookTube. Like, did I kind of sort of know they existed? Yeah, but I didn't realize how big of a deal they were. I would just walk up to a book, and if the synopsis sounded interesting, I would be like, yeah, I'm gonna read that. I never paid attention to what age was supposed to be reading it, I was just like, okay, like I just don't pay attention to classifications. And I mean, I didn't. Now, I mean, I feel like, to be part of this community, like people want you to mention, like, even for like the BookTube SFF Awards, for instance. I know some people that have submitted books under a specific category and then being told, oh no, that book is actually this. And it's like, okay, like I totally didn't think about that. So, I mean, it's interesting to me that we've once again put something that no matter what kind, like no matter what, it is a book. It is all of the, it's like it's the same thing, same form. It's a story that is giving us some kind of value in some way, shape, or form, that we have to put it once again in these silly little boxes. It's like everything has to fit in a special societal norm. And I just do not understand that. I mean, putting people into boxes and telling us that we have to conform to this specific standard is frustrating enough. But then taking something else that is literally, I mean, we are all people. So, I mean, we are all people. We all have, something to give. Same thing for books. Books are, they are all one thing. They are paper with words on them, and they are conveying a thing to us in some way, shape, or form. I mean, why do we need to put it in a little tiny box saying, oh, well, you're not ready for this yet, so we're gonna classify this as like an older person thing, or you're too old for this, so we're gonna we're gonna put this for a younger audience. You should be reading this. It just boggles my mind, because we should all just read what we want to read. I mean, just be glad that we're reading whatsoever, because, and I hate to be the one to bring this up, because I'm sure it's being talked about, but the literacy rate in the world, but also in the United States, has gone down significantly. And I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people I know of all different ages talk about how much they hate reading, they hate books because of school. Like, school made me read this thing and now I no longer like reading, or I never liked reading. I was never a reader. I was just, it's not something that they were a part of. And when I stumble across someone who just says they hate reading, it makes my blood boil, because I'm just like, reading has so much value and you can read whatever you want, because everything brings something to someone. And a perfect example of this is fan fiction. There is so much stigma surrounding fan fiction, and it's something that brings me so much joy. It helped me through so many hard periods of time in my life. Like, I would just find a fandom or something, and then I just consume so much fic and use it as kind of an escape. And I mean, that's not necessarily the most healthy thing, but it brought me joy and it gave me something to do, and it just helped me through so many difficult times in my life. And the fact that people shame you for reading something you enjoy, whether it's YA or fan fiction or middle grade or whatever, is wrong. As long as we're doing something we enjoy, and as long as we're reading something, I don't see how it's a problem. Because there are so many people out there that don't read or don't know how to read. And the fact that people are shaming people for reading certain kinds of things, or that are shaming people for even just, I don't even know how to describe it, but just shaming people in general, is just so frustrating to me, because it's something we enjoy and we shouldn't be judged for the thing that we enjoy, because if you do that, it can be severely damaging to a person. And I mean, because of my upbringing and my ability to read what I wanted when I was in that non-traditional education system, I have a love for like all different classifications and so many different genres. I'll pretty much pick up anything as long as it sounds interesting to me. And all of it brings value. Everything that you read brings value, whether it's a newspaper article or a fanfic or a YA novel or an adult novel, classics, like all of it brings joy to someone and brings value to someone. And I think honestly, if we allowed people to read what they wanted when they wanted to, like I had in my non-traditional education system, we would have more readers and we would have so many great discussions, because books not only enrich us, but they just really bring out so many different conversations. We get so many different perspectives based on things like that. And I just really think that we should bring in a wide variety of genres and classifications into the education system, no matter what age you are, because it gives us a broader horizon and it doesn't force us to conform to these little boxes. And yeah, I think I'm going to stop it here. I hope this made sense. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and experiences down below, if you've had something similar to me, or if you've had something similar to Rocky or any of the other people that I'm going to link down below, because I think it's a really interesting thing to talk about, and I think it's really important to talk about, because it's just something that I have noticed more and more, especially since I've gotten older. And I think it's something that we need to talk about and something that we need to reevaluate, because the way things are right now just doesn't seem to be working. As always, you guys know the drill. I have both of my social media links down below in the description. I have, as I said, a Twitter, which is at A Sea of Tomes, which is the same as my handle here. And I also have a Goodreads for you guys to enjoy if you'd like. You can see all the things that I'm reading or planning on reading, since my TBR is so large. And I will catch you later in another video for you guys again soon. Bye!